Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Walk Magick video. So I apologize, I know this year I started out pumping like 3 videos a week pretty much, and unfortunately I've been doing a lot of artwork. Boleskine Works, boleskine.net. I sell my art through my fiance's website. You could check it out there. Steles and a lot of acrylic on canvas type pieces. A whole variety of different styles and imagery. That said, you burn out doing one thing too much, so I've had to put making videos just on temporary pauses, so I'm slowing down a little bit, and then once I get through my next few art projects, I'll pick back up on YouTube. But I'm still here, I'm still doing videos, and today we're going to be going over, finally, the second method of Liber HHH, which is titled Section AAA. Without further ado, let's begin. Of the text, Liber HHH, this practice is my absolute favorite. As Thelemites, really, as occultists, as people, as humans, we must all grapple with our mortality and the fact that one day our earthly vessel must perish. There's no getting around it. However, we can take measures, first to ensure that our inevitable departure will be one of joy, not fear. And also, we can transcend our ego, unlocking the secrets of the immortal soul, thereby conquering death. Now, Liber Yod, another text by Crowley, has a method that helps. But I'll summarize what I'm getting at, not to go into Liber Yod completely. We are not of our flesh, nor our mind. If we lost our 5 senses, what would be left? Just a consciousness floating in a void. Well, even the ego dies eventually. So if we then turn off our thoughts, our mind, what is left? Nothing but what would be called a soul floating in the ether. And it would be indistinguishable from any other part of the ether since it's made of the same substance. If, as Magi, we aim towards achieving a state of union which allows us to realize that we are but spirit inhabiting a vessel made of the elements, and that the division of ourselves from the universe is an illusion, then by coming into perfect union, understanding that the soul cannot be changed or harmed, we remove all fear and thus can choose to experience joy in all things, never fear, never crazy emotions to the extreme which rise out of fear. So this practice is the first step in that direction. Section AAA begins with a quote, "These loosen the swathings of the corpse. These unbind the feet of Osiris, so that the flaming god may rage through the firmament with his fantastic spear." End quote. And that's from Liber Lapidus Lazuli, chapter 7, verse 3, I believe. And out of that verse, the corpse represents our body. It is dead matter made conscious by the soul inhabiting it, the spark of divinity in the center of our being. Our aim as Thelemites is to do our true will, thus to experience the joy promised of Nui, to take our pleasure on the earth amongst the living. The spear in the above quote is symbolic of the phallus, indicating Saul, our heart center, the true will. Now, in Liber HHH, section AAA, which we're covering today, verse 18, all the way at the end of the section, I'm going to read in full. It instructs in a specific way of how to go about completing the verses of this text as groups. It says, do 0 through 2 until they are perfect. Then do only 3 through 7, and you can read the rest of the passage for yourself. But so you're supposed to do this text in groups. For myself, I found it more beneficial to just do it like how I broke down the first section, where you start by just doing asana. Then you start by doing asana and verse 1, then you do 0, 1, and 2, then you do verses 0, 1, 2, and 3, and once you get that series perfect, then you add the next verse. That worked for me. If you find it better to just do the groups, and then at the end, put all the groups together, if that works for you, great, follow the instructions. But I'll be breaking down this text, just as I did the last Liber HHH video, by adding one more verse onto the previous ones at a time. At the very end of this section, after verse 18, there's a warning. I'm just going to read it in full. It's not that long. Quote, note by Frater O.M. It's Crowley, I believe 6 degree equals 5 square. At any time during this meditation, the concentration may bring about samadhi. This is to be feared and shunned more than any other breaking of control, for that it is the most tremendous of the forces which threaten to obsess. There is also some danger of acute delirious melancholia at point 1, end quote. For this practice, you need to remain detached, in control, and separate from the visions. Note that this particular method may cause intense depression, melancholia. You're going to be making visions of yourself dying hundreds of thousands of grisly deaths. Make sure to take care of yourself on an emotional level. While you're doing this practice, self-care and even a break is mandatory. I once had a student, here's a little story, who upon getting to Yesod and the system we were working, and in that system synonymous with the grade of Zealotr in AA, they had begun to grow so confident in themselves that their ego was starting to get out of control. During one phone call, they dared call themselves an adept. And I had an inkling of a thought that in a past life, yeah, they may have made it to a certain adeptus grade, and I had shared that, and they took that as, well, I'm already an adept. Well, upon her saying that she was an adept, I said, okay, if you're of such a grade and you're claiming to be an adept, you'll have no problem going through section AAA of Liber HHH. Make an attempt now and call me back. And now, mind you, I just wanted her to do at least verse 0 and 1. I didn't want her to do the whole text, but she made an attempt at doing the whole text, right? Well, she called me back, and she attempted to do the whole text on her first try. And upon viewing herself dying in various ways in verse 1, she halted the practice, broke down crying, called me back with the most serious depression and severe emotional reaction that I'd ever seen from that person. Well, that's it. My point is this. Take this practice slowly. When I did it, I was able to separate my reality from the visions I created. While I understand that one day I will in fact perish, it is not today, at least not at this moment. It could happen in the next moment, but it's not happening right now, and that's okay. But it is unavoidable. One day it's going to happen, and I'm not going to get upset about it. As this practice went on, after creating thousands of scenarios where I saw myself die, eventually I became immune, and there was a sense of acceptance that overcame me. So I try to remain detached if you do this practice. If it does affect you emotionally, then try to see your visions as a movie, a fiction, and nothing more. Until you can start to accept that one day, one of these visions may indeed come to pass, and there's nothing that you could do to stop it. That's the nature of life. With all of that said, let's get to the rest of the text. Verse 0, quote, be seated in thine asana, or recumbent in shavasana, or in the position of the dying Buddha, end quote. So you should have already finished your Liber E asana practices a long time ago by the time you're getting to this part of this text. Go into your chosen asana, or the dying Buddha posture, which is also called corpse pose, shavasana. Remain here, I suggest, for a solid good to 5-10 minutes of perfect stillness. Then add verse 1, quote, think of thy death. Imagine the various diseases that may attack thee, or the accidents overtake thee. Picture the process of death, applying always to thyself. A useful preliminary practice is to read textbooks of pathology and to visit museums and dissecting rooms, end quote. I never made it to a morgue while doing this text, but I did search online many intense and horrible images of crime scenes and decomposition phases. This verse is one of my favorite verses in any practice I've ever done. Be creative. I'm gonna put my script aside for a second and share just a little off the cuff. At the time, I was a very heavy cigarette smoker. I started smoking at like 10, 11 years old. 13 years old was when I started really smoking on a consistent basis up until adulthood. So 15, 20 years of smoking cigarettes, from there on. So I made sure to pick things that were likely to happen as well as things that were not likely to happen. I envisioned myself in this practice, created visions dying of lung cancer from smoking and getting that diagnosis and going through the process of what that might look like with chemotherapy and it not working and all of the horror surrounding that. I chose things like I was hiking and a pack of wolves attacked and destroyed me. A bear attacked me. I chose a vision where I jumped off like a skyscraper, like the Empire State Building or something, smack. Hundreds of different scenarios, thousands of different scenarios, one after another. You need to create them in the most brutal detail. And I find looking at your own life, especially things that you've done that are potentially dangerous. Let's say you're a firefighter and you're doing this practice, it would be beneficial to see what it would be like in that vision if you burn to death while trying to save a home or a family from their house being on fire. Something that's very personal to you. I don't know if you're a construction worker, stuff falls on you, or you get collapsed under a building that the foundation wasn't sturdy as you were on the construction site, and it collapses and you're stuck there for 5 or 6 days until you wither away. Things that can happen tend to have a more emotionally impactful affection on the person doing this practice, in my experience. But be creative, don't limit yourself there. Study the theory of death. What happens on a mental level, a physical level, a spiritual level from different religions? What does that process look like? Be very creative. Think of any possible thing that could happen. I did visions where I self-sacrificed. I did visions of suicide. I did visions of murder. I did visions where I don't want to get flagged on YouTube, but assaulted by a person of the opposite gender in a way that I would not like to, against my will, and then offed, unalived. I've heard people say on YouTube. Be very creative. Like, you could do literally anything. Jumping off of buildings, skyscrapers, bridges. You're in a plane, it crashes. Getting hit by a car, impaling yourself. Just, any number of ways that you could think of, especially the ones that are more personal to you. You're a hiker, you get lost in the woods, and any number of different things happen. And go slow. Go through the whole process of the moment that calamity strikes up until the event happens and you pass. And see what that whole thing looks like. Don't become one with the vision. Separate yourself from it. You don't want to commit to samadhi with this scenario, but it's okay to feel it on an emotional level. The more you do it and the more impactful the emotions, eventually you don't grow numb or become immune, but you get used to them and you learn different tricks to processing emotions. And that translates into other areas of life after this practice, things that don't pertain to death. When you can control your emotions, when they come very severely in any scenario, you're likely to be able to control them better in other scenarios when they arise. That being said, when verse 1 is accomplished, you're going to start doing verses 0, 1, and 2. Quote, "Continue this practice until death is complete. Follow the corpse through the stages of embalming, wrapping, and burial." End quote. How I chose to do this verse is, each practice, I would pick, not at the beginning when I was doing just verse 1, but once I started doing verses 0, 1, and 2, I would think up every practice 2 or 3 times a day, 10 to 20 different death scenarios. But each time, as I'm about to end verse 1, I chose to end it with a self-sacrifice by stabbing myself with a scimitar through my midsection in an Egyptian temple in ancient Egypt. I would then have priests who were there that once I perished would take my body away for cleaning and mummification. I would remain on the Astral observing the entire process as they laid the body on limestone altar, washed it, removed organs, and finally wrapped it. After a couple of days or weeks, when you complete verses 0, 1 through 2, add verse 3 to the batch. Quote, "Now imagine a divine breath entering thy nostrils. How I did this was to use my astral body that I had observed the mummification, take that astral form and lay down overlapping the physical body that you've created there in the vision. Since I was using Shavasana for this method, I would view my deceased and wrapped body, my astral body, and my physical body all lining up so that all three were superimposed. Then I would take a physical breath through my nose, and I would see the air I breathe as light, which entered both my physical body but also the body in these visions. And it was not until I did this enough times that I was able to create a physical sensation in my body that I was satisfied that I had gotten this verse done. Then add verse 4, quote, "Next, imagine a divine light enlightening the eyes," end quote. So after feeling the light that I had breathed in, I would see it activate my eyes, and they would glow behind the lids so bright that this light was seen through my eyelids in that electric blue astral color. For me, that was very easy, and it only took a few attempts. Hopefully that's the same for you to perfect. Add verse 5, quote, "Next, imagine the divine voice awakening the ears," end quote. So from the very first time I did this verse, I actually heard a voice in my physical ears, and it screamed or kind of uttered Jah, J-A-H, similar to the divine name of Chakma, but spelled different. Instead of just Yod Hey, it was Yod Aleph Hey. It only took a couple of tries for it to manifest as a loud noise, as if someone were talking in the room I was in. I don't suggest you use that word, but you should hear a divine voice awakening your ears, and it should be physical. It could be any sound, but it has to be a divine voice. So how you register that is up to you. It's personal. But I do argue that you should physically hear something. Until that happens, I would argue you have not completed this verse. But once you finish it properly and are satisfied, add verse 6, quote, "Next, imagine a divine kiss imprinted on the lips," end quote. Sometimes I would create a face of beauty made of electric blue astral light who would kiss me. Sometimes I would just imagine I felt it. Eventually, a physical sensation was felt, and it filled my entire being with intoxication, virility, and strength, and this must also be physically felt. Adding verse 7 to the previous one, so now you're doing verses 0, which culminate in verse 7, quote, "Next, imagine the divine energy informing the nerves and muscles of the body, and concentrate on the phenomenon which will already have been observed in verse 3, the restoring of the circulation," end quote. So verse 3 was the divine breath entering the nostrils and illumining the eyes. Now and you've had that kiss on your lips, now your nerve endings are stimulated and all of your muscle and epidermis is coming to life. Physical sensations must be produced all throughout the body. Until that occurs, you have not completed this portion of the meditation. But once you have, add verse 8, quote, "Last, imagine the return of the reproductive power and employ this to the impregnation of the egg of light in which man is bathed," end quote. How I do this? I would cause an extra stimulation in the genital area, then see my egg-shaped aura around me become very vibrant. Then the energy present from the divine breath now acts as a force which, having penetrated my body of light, comes through the genital area, impregnating the egg of light, and begins to a manifestation from that penetrating force. In other words, the vision of the dead body made in this visual practice is about to be reborn from this energy. That energy is surging through the lowest chakra, right, the Svadhisthana at this point, and coming out there into your body of light. Adding verse 9, quote, "Now represent to thyself that this egg is the disk of the sun setting in the west," end quote. The sun setting in the west is symbolic of death, as the sun rising in the east is symbolic of new life. So my visuals of the egg-shaped aura, which we're creating by doing this practice, turns from that egg-shaped electric blue into a perfect sphere of gold brilliant radiance, just like the sun. Create astral visuals of the horizon and landmass, which the sun is now setting behind. When you've perfected all this, add verse 10, and quote, "Let it sink into blackness, born in the bark of heaven, upon the back of the holy cow Hathor, and it may be that thou shalt hear the moaning thereof. End quote. See the sun that you are set into utter blackness that engulfs this sun, and its light is contained within it, as if there is nothing for the light to reflect off of. So this sun, its light is just stuck there with darkness around it, darkness so encompassing that it's almost threatening to take the light of the sun. And as you descend, land upon the back of a huge cow who is Hathor, and hear its moan audibly. Add verse 11 when you've perfected that. Quote, let it become blacker than all blackness, and in this meditation thou shalt be utterly without fear, for that the blackness that will appear unto thee is a thing dreadful beyond all thy comprehension. End quote. So again, the cow kind of disappears, and you continue to go down and see the darkness threaten to engulf the light of the sun. A darkness so black that it starts to penetrate the radius of the sun and suck up its light. You could even feel a sense of dread as the blackness of the dark threatens your existence. Add verse 12. Quote, now then shall the blackness pass, and with rose and gold shalt thou arise in the east, with the cry of a hawk resounding in thine ear. Shrill shall it be, and harsh. End quote. Cause this sound to happen. Suddenly the darkness begins to diminish, and you come on the horizon of the east, and the light of your sun is reflected on the landmass in beautiful pinks and golds. Hear the screech of a hawk audibly. Add verse 13. Quote, at the end shalt thou rise and stand in the mid-heaven, a globe of glory, and therewith shall arise the mighty sound that holy men have likened unto the roaring of a lion. End quote. So, continue rising in the east, feel your solar strength increase to its strongest as you approach the midheaven in the south. Physically and audibly, cause yourself to hear the roaring of a lion. You need to hear it with your physical ears. I believe it was the last video, Liber HHH, I mentioned Donald Tyson's Magician's Workbook, and there's that rosy cross practice where you physically cause, you're laying in the position of the cross, with your arms outstretched and your legs together outstretched, and you take on the elements. So your head is the element of air on the rosy cross. Your right arm is fire, your left arm is water, your legs are earth, and you need to cause those elements to be physically felt on those portions of the body. So you would force the feeling of wind on your face, even though you're probably in a temple or a room with no air flowing. Feel earth on your legs, density, weight. Feel water on your left arm, a moisture, feel rain. So as a yogi, you need to be able to create physical sensations all throughout your body at will, just like that. Same thing, you can cause things to be physically heard audibly. It's hard to communicate how to do that. You have to learn the trick yourself. But you can cause yourself to physically see things. You can cause yourself to audibly hear things. It's doable. It takes practice, and there's hard to do. We're not in person together. I can't show you how I do it. Communicating through a voice recording, but it is doable. You have to learn how to do that. Adding verse 14, quote, then shalt thou withdraw thyself from the vision, gathering thyself into the divine form of Osiris upon his throne. End quote. So you could do this in several ways. Personally, I opt for banishing and dissipating all creative visuals, and then causing myself to assume the god form of Osiris upon his throne in a temple built for Osiris. You can look up images online to get an idea of what he looks like and what that temple might look like, and you need to create that vision and Liber O for assuming god forms. Should have already done that by the time you're approaching this text, but worth mentioning. Adding verse 15 to the mix, quote, then shalt thou repeat audibly the cry of triumph of the God re-arisen, as it shall be given unto thee by thy superior. End quote. Since when I took up this text, my teacher had already passed, I chose to use that word Jah, which had already come to me earlier in this method. So I shouted it as Osiris on the astral plane as a war cry. Jah! Just put all of your force into it. So whatever is communicated to you, or if you have a teacher and you're doing this in AA, they should communicate what you should use. Maybe you'll even get something from your holy guardian angel that they should tell you to use specifically. It happens. Adding verse 16, quote, "And this being accomplished, thou mayest enter again into the vision, that thereby shall be perfected in thee." End quote. So, in my opinion, you have the option of starting over from verse 1, or simply starting from the point of turning into the sun which sinks into blackness in the west. Either way, you're going to end this verse by becoming Osiris and shouting the cry of triumph of the God re-arisen. And finally, verse 17, quote, "After this shalt thou return into the body and give thanks unto the Most High God, Yaida, yea, unto the Most High God, Yaida." End quote. So, you can do this. You can return into your physical body and then give thanks unto the Most High God. Yaida is an Enochian word meaning Most High God. Yaida. So you could either create a ritual physically, or you could do something on the astral plane that gives worship unto God, whatever that is to you, this light, this spark of divinity that's of creation, whatever God is to you. I'm not going to tell you what you should think God is. I have my own opinions of what it is and what it is not, for a little play on words. So how one chooses to worship it's extremely personal. Discover what ways are best for you, and then do it. Know that the Most High God is synonymous with, in my opinion, the most inner light. So I would, if you need a suggestion, aim towards praise and worship of the most inner light, or the highest, or whatever it is to you, Then there's verse 18, which gives some guidance about this portion of Liber HHH, which is a couple of paragraphs I've summarized at the beginning of the text. You could read it yourself, but I'm just going to read the last 2 sentences to close out. So whether you did this practice like how I did it, verse by verse by verse, or doing it in groups and then putting that groups together, 0 through 2, 3 through 7, verse 8, 9 through 13, and then put them all together or not, or you did it verse 0 and 1, then 0 through 2, then 0 through 3, and so on. Once you finish the text, these final 2 sentences kind of cover up the results of this practice. Quote, "And let this be continued until perfect success be attained therein. For this is a mighty meditation and holy, having power even upon death, yea, having power even upon death." End quote. Love is the law. Love under will. I hope to see you all in the next one. Cheers.